Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Welcome to the show. This week, astral projection and remote viewing. Gonna be quite the topic, Rich, but what do you got? You got a little something first to introduce.
We have decided to introduce a new segment to our show. We're calling it Mental Wealth. See, everybody pays lip service to mental health, but we feel that what we have is a treasure of information, techniques, strategies, and we're going to share some of that information on a weekly basis. We're calling it Your Mental Wealth.
I like it. I get it. It's like a play on words, like mental health.
Mental wealth. You know, I didn't have another rhyme for mental, but wealth and health did very well together. So, Mark, I think you have something for our viewers.
All right. So today's mental wealth tip. Well, I thought it was appropriate because it's November, and we should honor the Movember men's health awareness. I think our users may have noticed that I haven't shaved or bathed in 6 days, which smells treacherous. But it's all for Movember. Which I'm not really sure. Actually, what's that about, Rich?
Men's health. And by the way, I'm glad we're on Zoom if you haven't bathed, because you smell fine from here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You've noticed. Well, yeah. So Movember's all about men's health. Let me do some quick research here. It turns out it's about raising awareness on men's health issues, particularly prostate cancer, testicular cancer, which is a noble cause because indeed, I have a prostate and testicles to manage. And of course, like my prostate and testicles, but more important is the third area, men's health, mental health, particularly men's suicide. So that's poignant and relative. Especially today, since half the country's men are contemplating it, depending on which way the election turns out. Am I right?
Well, I would say at least there's a lot of depression floating around and maybe a little bit of anxiety. And I sure hope that half of them don't suicide.
No, me too.
It would screw up all the statistics that we have.
But, our loyal viewers know we take this seriously, which is exactly why I stopped bathing and shaving in the first place. So you're welcome.
Okay.
But the moment of Zen here is to really focus on raising awareness on men's mental health, particularly, depression and suicide, and make it okay to talk about, the whole macho man, I'm going to stuff my feelings and blow my brains out is not a solution. It's not the mental wealth tip. So
well, the mental wealth is please have the guts to actually talk about it.
So that's our tip for the day. So onwards and upwards, right? To astral projection.
Especially if we're onwards and upwards with astral projection and remote viewing. That's pretty up there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's as high up as you go. I mean, and it's a good follow-up to last week's show, on spirits and ghouls and goblins and ghosts.
Hey, I have a question for you, because I was thinking about how is astral projection different from an out-of-body experience?
I got to read down my notes.
Oh, no, I thought you were just going to answer. I thought you knew that one.
I do. I was building. I was building the tension.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were building. Okay,
it was building the tension.
Okay, go ahead and build.
Well, it's kind of a follow-up to last week, the differences between near-death experience, out-of-body experience, and shared death experience. I think astral projection takes it another step. If we had a part 4, our fourth segment to that show last week, because it is uniquely different to OBs, and there's a lot of similar features. So we're going to not do as much compare and contrasting, but we'll definitely touch on that. Because I think that, astral projection's been around forever. I mean, I think the Roman Empire has documentation about this. Every culture, every language, it's ubiquitous. It's overwhelming to research. I mean, even Helen Keller claimed to have traveled to Athens, via astral projection. And I think in our more modern culture, it's been popularized by some of our heroes, I guess, or the books that we've read that have influenced our thinking. The Edgar Cayce's and Carlos Castaneda's of the world. And I think astral projection, one way it differs from out of body experiences, it's more, out of body experience may occur spontaneously, but it also can be around the perceived threat of death or a toxic delirium, and kind of what we delineated last week. But astral projection is more shamanistic journeying. The Native Americans going into their teepees and doing their voyages.
Well, I must admit, I was a weird little kid because when I was 14, I read Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body, and I did what he said, and I was across the room looking at myself. It scared the crap out of me.
And Monroe was one of both of our big influencers, and
yeah,
we got some good stuff about him too. But what do the Native Americans call their teepee? Vision quests.
Yeah, vision quest.
So even Worf on the Enterprise did his vision quest to try to meet Kalis. So it's everywhere and nowhere, like the Matrix. So we're going to hammer this down and settle this issue today.
Go for it.
I mean, for those of you who are not from planet Earth and somehow are unfamiliar with the concept of astral projection, I guess a loose definition is the sensation of being separated from your physical self, your physical body. Your mind is still awake, lucid, sentient, but your body's asleep, and doing that in a controlled way. Whereas OBEs, again, people tend to think spontaneous OBEs can happen. Not always spontaneous astral projection. That seems to be more of like a intention-driven thing. So, what's the goal? Obviously, the implications are ginormous, both existential and then also as a weapon and as a healing modality. The claims of gaining information that people couldn't have otherwise have known has always been fascinating and intriguing. But this isn't like fringe sci-fi channel stuff. I mean, governments and world leaders have spent massive amounts of money investigating this, which is really interesting. And another thing in my research, since the pandemic, it's kind of interesting that astral projection has shot way up in popularity. Like there's a whole Reddit group to it. And back in April, they were conducting all these out of body missions and trying to psychologically infiltrate and invade military bases and Wuhan, get in the Wuhan lab, figure out what happened. The Pentagon's always been a target. Area 51. Remember when they had all those people, the million people were going to storm Area 51? Now they're like, screw it, we're on lockdown. We're just going to astral project in there and find the spacecrafts. So it's kind of fascinating that it's increased during the pandemic.
Well, I think it's a really it's an important concept in terms of expanding what we define as our reality and what we define as human. I mean, we're very limited to what we can measure.
Yeah, that's where the burden of proof and the evidence in my left brain always wants to go, and we'll get into that in a second. But the novelty of astral projection, not only for the reasons I said before, but also groups are trying to astral project now, and it reminds me a little bit of that movie in Inception with Leo DiCaprio, and that you have a traveler that creates this astralscape. Essentially, it connects it to a sigil, I believe it's called. A sigil is like a symbol used in ritual magic. Interestingly, it's usually a pictographic depiction of a Jinn, which we talked about last week, or other entity, some other deity or demigod, but it usually implies witchcraft, which the closest comparison is like a talisman, but a talisman is
Mhm.
an object that like kind of brings good fortune or something like a rabbit's foot. Is that a talisman? I don't know. But the sigil's really interesting. We could talk all about that, but there's an association there. And like I said, this isn't just crackpots. The CIA, well, what was then the DIA, declassified details of the famous Stargate project, which began in 1978. They declassified that file, I think, in '95. But it was really interesting because they spent millions, I mean, 20 plus $1 million on this. It was a Cold War thing, 1978. In addition to spying and like espionage and figuring out what the Russians are doing and all that, some believe it was used actually as defense because the Russians were ahead of us, as they frequently are in a lot of areas, in trying to infiltrate and spy on us through the same means. And so it was thought by some people to be a response or a defense to that. And it's interestingly supported by some of the travelers that say that, they've encountered energy barriers. They get to sensitive buildings like the Pentagon and stuff, and it's almost as if there's an energy barrier that their astral body is blocked by, or they get suddenly like drained of energy, as if something's interfering with their pattern, or they've even reported bumping into like Green Beret-esque astral guards and stuff like that, which is like a whole new battlefield. It's kind of cool to think about.
I remember a psychic, or a person who claimed to be psychic anyway, came out of my office and, came in, walked around and said, "Wow, you got this place sealed up like a vault, don't you?" And I would pray, for safety for my patients and myself, and put certain crystals and things to actually do that. And maybe it was just the way I thought about it, but yeah, I said, yeah, yeah, I do want to seal this up. Want it to be a sterile field. I don't want any bad guys getting in here. And I guess it does come back to what you believe, but this stuff has been talked about for as long as there have been human beings. I mean, think about it. Halloween, people, that's when the veil's
The
supposed to
thinning
be
of the
thin.
veil.
You can go and say hi to your relatives. The other place I've had a out of body, I don't know what to call it anymore. I'm going to call it astral, in dreams, and that was actually the one place that I got confirmation, because I
Hmm.
saw something and then it was confirmed later. It was something I could not have known, and that's sort of how they figure this thing out. And my mentor was involved in this. Remember the movie Men Who Stare at Goats?
Oh yeah, classic.
Yeah, well, he
I
was
remember it.
he was involved in that. So he did all kinds of interesting psychic stuff, and so I did get a little bit of an education on that.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember that movie well. I don't think a lot of people knew how to place that. It kind of came at a weird time of the year and a time of the culture that I don't think it clicked on with people as much at the time. And then it sort of has gained uh, a cult following, because
Well,
it's.
if you think of the astral stuff that we're talking about as intentional, it kind of does segue, or fit really well with the remote viewing stuff,
Hmm.
because you're getting information. I mean, who knows? The mind is not local. Who knows if I was really floating down to my parents' house that night that I had this experience. I don't know. Was it just a psychic thing? I had an impression. I
or
don't
your
know.
or
But
precognition and dream.
it felt like I was there. All right, but who knows? It's all a matter of what label you put on it. If when it happens to you, it feels pretty real.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll get into that a little bit about how I got turned on to that thinking early on. But the interest, I mean, I'm always about like not so much what's the mechanism, but I need some dots to connect, and uh, it helps me understand things. And one of the interesting things about astral projection that I think is unique is travelers can visit both via distance and time. So I can sit down in the Pentagon and I can remote view into the Kremlin, see what's going on in Earth time, in real time, in the consensus reality. Or interestingly, they can travel in time. You know, we talked about the non-local nature of the universe and the concept of a tesseract and a timeless existence. You know, that would make sense. You can travel to time, but you know, this is so much so that it's well described. You know, Robert Monroe called it locale one, or basically here now. So that would be like me today trying to look at the Kremlin in real time. Robert Bruce called it the real time zone, but it's thought to be the closest non-physical dimension level that we can access. Sort of that first layer, you know, that almost like this idea of the Dante's Inferno and these different astral planes. It's not just here and then the thereafter, or alive and dead. It's kind of like a hologram or a fractal, and this tesseract of existence of all time and space in a simultaneous moment. If you can suspend the disbelief of that, you can easily explain the mechanism of traveling both geographically but also temporally, which I think is super cool.
What occurs to me as of great interest with astral projection and remote viewing is the idea that you can be trained to do it, as opposed to it just kind of happens to you. Or, you know, like if you're Michael Jordan, if you're 6'7", you could be a better basketball player, but that you can be trained at this. And
Yeah.
I think what the military did with this was to train people who didn't necessarily have so-called psychic gifts, found that this was amazingly accurate, the remote viewing stuff anyway. And then there's the other pieces. There's a whole metaphysical idea, or even a psycho-spiritual idea about the astral, the lower astral. You hear people who are metaphysical, they'll talk about, well, you better watch out about the lower astral because they got bad guys in there, or something like that. And
Yeah, like they're at a lower frequency or vibration.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about Dante's Inferno. There's a dead white guy, German, by the name of Max Heindel, who kind of referred to travelers, that first level traveler, the ones that we're kind of talking about right now, as an etheric double acting as a medium or a conduit, which I think of as sort of like a spiritual wormhole, if you will, between the astral and the physical realms or planes. And you know, it's connected by the silver cord, which we'll talk about in a second. But the I guess the closest evidence, you know, to your point, is my early thinking was how can you recreate this, or you know, reproduce it or control it, basically some more systematic way to approach it. And there's been a lot of really interesting attempts, not just sort of the Stargate stuff, but also you brain stimulation. You stimulate a part of the brain called the temporal parietal junction. It creates spontaneous OBEs and sort of an astral-like autoscopic view. Drugs that belong to a class called the aryl cyclohexamines interestingly do this. Nobody knows why. Those are the ketamines and the PCP, its grandfather before that. We talked on the show, I think a couple weeks ago, about DMT. It's an endogenous neurotransmitter we know it's released at the moment of death, but it's in your bloodstream right now. We can draw your blood, and DMT is actually in there. So it's sort of this endogenous version of a Franken chemical like ketamine. Of course, people have done this through starvation and fasting and stuff like that. But you know, we were talking before the show that what's the silver cord? So the silver cord is some sort of a mechanical bridge between this plane and the first astral plane. And I've always been fascinated by the silver cord because I've seen it with my own eyes. I didn't see it to a level of detail. I've always wondered if it's sort of like a astral umbilical cord. Is it connected to our belly buttons? Um, I had fun researching that because it turned out it's more like a web that's overlaid over the astral body that interfaces with the physical body. Its heaviest concentration or plug-in points, like a belly button is to a fetus, are the chakras, interestingly. And if you cut that thing or you break that thing, game over.
Yeah, it sounds like you have to really work at it to break it, though. This isn't like a little tiny cord that you just go snip and it's gone. This is
Yeah, I don't think you trip
a big
over it and
deal.
yank out the power cord like a
Yeah.
computer. But the thinking is if it breaks, you lose your connection, and then therefore you're dead. You're not able to communicate between the two worlds, if you will. And it's kind of, if you pull at it or stretch it, which some people have done, especially people who astrally project, and it's a very grounding tool. It connects. It reminds you of the bridge between the two worlds, and it can reintegrate you into that space or that plane of consciousness. But if you pull at it, it's kind of like this thread-like almost web of attachment, and not just this nice, neat umbilical cord. But it's really fascinating because it's seen across cultures. Why is it silver? Why not purple or blue? Why has it got to be silver? That's amazing to me. But don't die. You know what it reminds me of? The Chinese have the red thread of fate, which I think is romantic. I forget. It's like when the it's silver, similar to a silver cord, except it's connected between like the pinky of the man and the thumb of the woman.
Oh, wow.
But it exists in time and a space, almost as if they're soulmates, and they're tied together. And it's kind of like almost like kind of karma, where these two forces will inevitably be pulled together, drawn together at some point in life. I think it's quite romantic.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's another culture. I guess I left it out, but it's like a red string. Might be Kabbalah. I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But to your question, remote viewing occurs during astral projection. It's almost like a activity of the astral body. So it's sort of I guess a subset. But
They tested these guys. They would put a number in an envelope in another room, and I think the guy's name was Ingo Swann, was one of their first uh, test subjects, and he floated up there and he found it and told them what the number was, and that impressed them.
oh man, you're making me think of another story I don't have time to tell, but yeah, I wanted to study that in college. Um, Actually, with ketamine, just give someone ketamine, let them float out of their body, read a number. Um, I talked a lot with Bruce Grayson about that, and it's thought that the part of our brain that interprets numbers and symbols, and particularly letters, isn't a very active part of the astral. So it's very, almost like Inception, when anything written down was gobbledygook.
Well, I
Or
was told that that if you're in a dream, that if you see a number or letters, look away and look back, and it's going to change, then you're dreaming.
it will
And that's
change
how you get into like
100% of the time.
what's that?
It will change 100% of
Yeah,
the time. I've
and
used that
you'll
technique
know
for
you're
years.
dreaming. And I've tried that, and it really works.
100% of the time. You can stake your life on it, because sometimes you're not quite sure if you're dreaming, and your unconscious mind is trying to wake up in a lucid dream. But you want to be 100% sure before you do whatever that thing is that you want to do in your dreams that you can't do in real life, like
Right.
just drive real fast down the highway, or punch your boss out, or whatever fantasy land you got. People use that as a big source of creation. We've talked before about Edison and
Well, the whole idea is
Tesla.
we're working with parts of the mind that are really experiences, parts of the mind, I don't know how exactly to call it, that are valid and that most people experience, but they don't talk about because
Yeah,
they're afraid of being labeled as kooky. But these experiences are valid, they're profound, and they connect us as human beings. And I think that's pretty important nowadays where everybody is so isolated.
that's why we're talking about it, brother. But unlike clairvoyance, um, astral projection's more like witnessing, whereas clairvoyance is kind of like downloading a knowing,
To
I
knowing.
guess. So there's a more of a witnessing of that. I feel like in an out of body experience, you have a general, for one, you can have telepathic communication with the golden beings of light or dead loved ones or Michael Jackson or someone really cool I don't know about, but um, the intention isn't always the same as it would be obviously with clairvoyance or even an out of body experience. It's most similar to a lucid dream, which after my near death experience, I just had regularly. I thought that's when people said they were dreaming. I thought that's what they were doing. And I mean, I got quite regular at it, quite good. And I was probably about 10 years old when I ran across Monroe's book and really learned how to recreate it. Not every single night, not every single time, but much higher frequency. And again, that sentience and assurance that yes, this is a lucid dreaming. Off to the races, go do whatever it is I wanted to do, fly around the town. I didn't realize what astral projecting was or what the activity meant or what assignments I wanted to do. I was just a kid doing what I did and flying around and having fun. Um, but the whole lucid dream efforts. I mean, LeBerge Institute is enormous. It's enormous. And one of the things that's similar to astral projection, and I've experienced this part via lucid dreaming, is when you actually disconnect from your body, universally, cross-culturally, you get a very loud, buzzing, vibrating sense, often a whooshing sound. Um, and that just kind of occurs almost at the moment of separation from the body. And we spoke before about energy and vibration and stuff like that and frequency, and maybe that's a sudden jump up, or it's the brain disconnecting, unplugging from one reality into the other. It's definitely like some demarcation point. It's key.
I heard something spectacular doing one of these experiences, and to me it was just the kind of the energy of this really high place that I accessed. I mean, it was a very
Yeah.
high spiritual place, and I don't know, it sounded like a Rickenbacker 12-string guitar, which maybe is why I love those guitars so much. Who knows? But I think that these kind of discussions are very important to open people up to realms of experience of what it really means to be human. We're facing a time where materialism is being rammed down our throats, and yet we need to evolve spiritually if we're going to have the world that we want to have. I mean, there's my commercial. Why I want to talk about these things, and I think you're brilliant at it, Mark. And you've had so many of these experiences that people need to know there's more to life than just 9 to 5, go home, have a beer, and turn on the TV, because that's what's going to save us. We're kind of heading to a bad place. Everybody can feel it. But I don't feel so bad because these experiences are ordinary for me.
Well, and the big shift that we're trying to make happen, encourage people to think about is really the shift from the outward, the external at us stuff, which is where most of us spend the majority of our time, to turning inwards. And, you know, everyone knows kind of the lip service, like, oh, yoga, do this, that, the other thing. Um, I like real practical advice, like concrete tools everyone can relate to. And one cool way to turn inward and explore this innerscape and raise your vibration, it came out of the Monroe Institute. Matter of fact, talking about frequency and brainwaves, they developed was a hemisync, I guess, the binaural beats. And I actually have these DVD CDs. I had them a long time ago. You can actually get this stuff on YouTube
Yeah,
now,
me too. I've had
which
them
is
for a long
super
time.
cool. But pop one of those things on. The way it works is really kind of cool. I think it's simple to understand, but it's sort of fascinating to think about that, they generate a differential pulse, within the brain by two separate kind of sine wave audio signals in each ear. So, like, for example, if you have 100 hertz in your left ear and then 104 hertz in your right ear, the brain will cancel out those competing sounds, and that residual 4 hertz is generated within the brain itself, meaning it's not on the audio file at all. It's sort of like an echo or a harmonic that then can be tuned to manipulate brain states. And it's fascinating. It's powerful. I think anyone who puts like a halfway reasonable effort in it will really be surprised at the effect. Even if at the minimum it's a profound level of relaxation, calm. Uh, at the minimum.
Go figure that we would need that, huh?
Yeah, now's the time. So
Well, I would say this, that Carl Jung, Dr. Jung, said something that I believe to be really powerful for our times. He said the modern day shaman has to be a success in both worlds, in this material world and in the spiritual world. And that's kind of why we're bringing these things up, so that people start to think about them.
Well, so it's a good place to bookmark it for today, because next week we're going to go down the rabbit hole one step further and talk about ESP and precognition, which is just a perfect dovetail. This is lovely.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess
guess.
it was a lot of fun talking about this stuff. And one of the things that's so cool is just having the opportunity to share this with people, because you know it's so much fun. It
And it's
stimulates the
healing.
mind. It's like living Star Trek or something.
And it's what
So,
we need now. So
all right,
remember, until next week,
be well.
well,
Well, we didn't get it that time, but we could
yeah,
try
we'll
again
keep working
next
on
week.
it. We'll keep working on it.
See you, folks.
Bye, everyone.